to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Rush'n Attack, brought to us by Konami. Rush'n Attack, also known as Green Beret in Europe and Japan, is based off of the arcade game of the same name, and is a classic run-and-gun style, and a personal favorite of mine. In the game, we're playing as a special operative sent in to destroy an enemy weapon in the form of a giant missile that we destroy at the end of the game. When we get to the main menu, you can play the game 1 or 2 players simultaneously. After you press start, you get a little bit of your mission, and then you're dropped into the level number 1. This is one of those games where it's one-hit death, so you always have to be on your feet for sure, though there is an invincibility item that you can find in the game for a short period of time. For the most part, in Rush'n Attack, our goal is to rush. We're going to be getting past a lot of these enemies very quickly. The enemies have very strict patterns. You have your base enemy that will just run towards you. You have the enemy that will run towards you and then do a jump kick going over your head. And finally, the enemy that actually has a gun to fire at you. But they can only fire straight, thankfully, so you can always duck underneath their bullets. Learning this very easy pattern for these enemies is key to being able to just kind of run through a large portion of the enemies. In fact, a lot of them in the first level we can just jump over, though you have to make sure that you don't jump when there's a flying kick enemy coming your way. At the end of each one of the areas, there is a semi-boss-like encounter. The first one, though, is just a gauntlet of enemies. If you stand against the right wall and just mash the attack button, you'll be perfectly safe and be able to take out all of the enemies very easily, as they just kind of jump right towards your knife and are taken down. What you saw in level 1 is all you see throughout the entire game. The enemies do change up as far as the way they look, but the way they act is identical. So once you know which one's the flying kick enemy and which one's the gun enemy each time, you should have no problem being able to decide what you should do when an enemy is coming your way, whether you should run, jump, duck, or turn around and actually attack them. The few enemies that you find lying on the ground will actually give you a weapon power-up, either grenades or in this case the bazooka. In the arcade version there's also a flamethrower, though that was removed for the NES version. Also removed from the NES version, but was in the Famicom version, are some secret underground areas in levels 2, 4, and 6 by destroying certain landmines. I'm not sure why those were removed, but those aren't included in the NES version, though the NES version is slightly easier, giving you more lives to start with. Sometimes you're gonna have to turn around and actually deal with the enemies behind you, and it's perfectly fine to kind of stop, take out everyone, and then get your bearings before continuing on. Especially in later levels when the enemies jump at you even quicker with different patterns of them, with different types of the enemies running at you at one time, it can be tricky to decide what to do. For this boss, you have the 3 jetpack guys. Since we have the bazooka left over, this is very easy. We're going to wait for them to dive on down and then fire the bazooka. It looks like it won't hit them, but the bazooka actually hits a pretty decent distance as far as its hitbox is concerned, and can actually destroy those jet guys as they come right down. So I highly recommend getting the bazooka in the level and holding on to it until the end. As we begin level number 3, we're going to immediately start climbing on up. Running along the top portion here is a little bit easier than going along the bottom. That's usually the case throughout the game. The bottom areas usually do contain mines, so that alone makes the upper areas a little bit better to deal with. Ladders, though, you automatically kind of jump onto when you get near, so you have to be careful sometimes if you do a jump trying to avoid an enemy or a mine and end up jumping onto a ladder that you didn't want to. Only the enemies with the guns can actually use the ladders and climb up and down them, so keep that in mind if you're trying to run away from some of them. They will chase you down a little bit. One thing that's weird with Rush'n Attack is it's one of those games that uses up for jump. You're used to that in fighting games, but not necessarily all the arcade-style action games like this, so that also takes a bit of getting used to, and there's a lot of times where I make mistakes with the D-pad and end up jumping backwards when I just want to jump straight up, or just trying to go one direction and end up doing a jump. For the boss of this level, it's very easy. We're going to stay around the center of the screen if possible. I did an accidental back jump. Perfect example of what I was just talking about. But you want to be around the center and then just keep ducking down and attacking the wolves or dogs that are trying to attack you. These dogs are a little bit annoying, but thankfully you have plenty of opportunity to kind of see where they're coming from and then be able to duck down and get them. I recommend letting go of down each time, that way you have plenty of time to react in case the direction that they're coming ends up switching up. As we begin the next level, I recommend staying on the bottom. The enemies inside of the cans that shoot these grenades up into the air, they are a bit of a problem and can hit you from below. So if you're on the top portion and they fire upwards, you can end up being hit by them. Usually I like to gather a lot of enemies and then do a nice little turn there, deal with some, and then reset everything as I make it to the next part. I do climb the ladder here to grab the bazooka, which is useful, but it's not something you absolutely have to do. It is going to help you a little bit whenever you decide to use it, but still, it's not something that you had to go up there and grab, which ended up putting me in a little bit of danger with those guys. The next area, thankfully, is a little bit easier to deal with, the giant, fence-like thing going on in the background, and a few enemies on the top part, but we're going to remain on the bottom. If you do need to use your bazooka any other time other than the boss, of course, go ahead and do so. You can also use the bazooka to efficiently get rid of all the landmines. If you duck and fire at landmines, it instantly gets rid of them. At the end of the level, it's time to deal with 3 helicopter enemies. They slowly work their way down level by level on the screen, as you'll see. This gives you plenty of opportunity to deliver some hits. If you have the bazooka, definitely use those, as it will instantly get rid of these helicopters. However, if you don't, you will have to attack, so be ready to attack either in the front or behind. Just mash that attack button. It doesn't take too many attacks, but you have to be careful you also don't get run into by the helicopters or the other enemies. Without the bazooka, it's a little bit of a difficult fight. At this point, we've pretty much seen everything that the game has to offer as far as enemy types and different situations that it's going to put us in. So it's now just kind of buckling down and getting through the last 2 levels here. It can be difficult at times when there's a bunch of enemies on screen, when there's ones that fire at you just because the bullet can easily disappear amongst all the enemies with all the flashing of the graphics. I've always enjoyed rushing attack, especially as someone who enjoys speedrunning, just because of that rush part of it. Running through these enemies, trying to jump over and avoid as many as possible is a lot of fun. I always like pushing the limits of just how many I can deal with by just getting past and not having to actually take out. Be very careful, there's a lot of landmines here. You can use your grenades to destroy some landmines as well as other enemies. They can be a bit useful, so use them up if you do end up having them. Pretty much at this point, just trying to be as careful as possible. Thankfully, there's a little bit of a break here in the middle of the level where it's just kind of a few normal enemies coming at us. Are the regular, non-jumping, non-firing enemies. But then, we're immediately met by a string of kick enemies. Thankfully, they're very easy to dodge as we reach the end of the level, as we can just run underneath all of them. But it's kind of funny, just the giant line of them. For this boss, the paratroopers, I recommend getting them onto the screen, letting them fall, watching out for their bullets, and then ducking on the far left side of the screen where they're not, and they'll just walk towards you slowly, and you can take them out one by one. It's now time for the final level of the game. This one, though, actually isn't too bad for the final level. We have 2 floors, and we're going to take the upper path a little bit into the level, as it is easier to actually get through the stage. You can jump between a couple of the levels here, so easily continue along this top portion. As you can see, not that many enemies to deal with. There's a few on the bottom that we're just kind of running along with, keeping them on screen as we run. And then we end up getting far less enemies to have to deal with ourselves up here. Eventually they will bunch up on you, so turn around and deal with them. If there is the gun shooting ones, they will try to climb up ladders if you stop at any point, so be prepared for that. Thankfully, the enemies can't jump across those gaps, so we're able to escape a few more, getting them onto the bottom part while we run along the top. At the end, be careful. I'm going to wait for most of the enemies to just disappear, and then go down here. At the end, be very careful of these lasers firing down at you. Just keep on moving forward, attack just once, and then keep moving with the enemies. Don't turn around and deal with the other ones. You may end up getting hit. And then at the end, what you have to do is deal with a string of enemies, one of which will drop a bazooka. Make sure that you pick it up and then fire it at the giant missile. If you stand at the right spot, which is right here, right in front of the missile, you can instantly pick it up without having to move again. So just keep attacking, and it'll bounce off of the wall and come right back to you, where you can then fire the bazooka and do damage to the missile. Once you've dealt with the missile, sit back and enjoy the ending, the Russian attack, on the NES. So there you have it, Russian Attack for the NES. A favorite of mine, really fun to just pick up and do a run of from time to time, and it's something I've enjoyed over the years, learning the different enemy patterns and being able to see how long I can run in a level without having to turn around and actually deal with them. I do like the animations of the soldiers and the like during the ending, and then you get the please push start button and you can start the game all over again. But with that, that's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.